On the very same day my brother was bestowed a Tesla, a sprawling estate valued at $13 million, in control of a company worth $75 million, I found myself relegated to the rear seating area of our family's living space, utterly unacknowledged. For a span of 2 hours, amidst a cascade of speeches, heartfelt toasts, and a resonant clinking of champagne flutes punctuated by my father's booming voice, which seemed to permeate every nook of the home I'd grown up in, my name was not uttered a single time. In stark contrast, my brother's name was invoked a remarkable 43 times. I am privy to this precise count because I meticulously tabulated each instance. When one feels erased, one finds solace and occupation in counting things. It serves as a distraction while the world celebrates another. The date was the 17th of May, in the year 2025, marking Grant Marsh's graduation gala from Harvard Business School. The Scarsdale estate played host to 80 distinguished guests, a gathering of family, cherished friends, and key business associates, embodying that distinct echelon of Westchester County affluence, characterized by effortless linen attire and an entourage of Lexus vehicles. The catering staff, clad in immaculate black, moved with practiced efficiency, while floral arrangements of pure white provided a striking visual contrast. The effervescent French champagne flowed freely, all meticulously orchestrated for the triumphant occasion of a man who had seemingly navigated life's complexities with unerring precision, within a family that appraised worth by academic credentials, professional titles, and an intrinsic polish derived from an absence of adversity. I occupied a seat in the furthest row of chairs arranged in the grand salon, a placement dictated not by a formal seating chart, but by an ingrained instinct. The back row had always been my designated position within this family dynamic, a place behind the scenes beyond the immediate discourse, a shadow to the son who held prominence. My father, Wesley Marsh, a man of 62 years and the chief executive officer of Marsh Industrial Coatings, stood at the forefront. His presence commanded attention, and his handshake conveyed the weight of a performance review. He was attired in a suit that undoubtedly surpassed the cost of many individuals' automobiles, and his smile, a rare commodity, was reserved solely for events honoring Grant. It has always been evident to me that Grant was destined for extraordinary achievements, he proclaimed. His words met with a resonant murmur of agreement from the assembly. In rooms populated by individuals of considerable means, assent is invariably granted to the pronouncements of the financier. Today, I am immensely proud to declare that Grant will assume the mantle of Chief Executive Officer of Marsh Industrial Coatings within the upcoming 2 years. He will inherit not only the company, but also this magnificent residence and the profound legacy meticulously cultivated by 3 generations of Marshes. A surge of applause erupted, genuine and robust, the kind reserved for occasions where attendees feel they are witnessing the anointment of royalty. And as a testament to our boundless pride, Wesley declared, pausing with a deliberate timing, a skill honed through years of commanding attention, we have procured a small token for Grant. He gestured subtly towards the expansive windows. There, gleaming under the warm May sunlight within the circular drive, stood a pristine, brand-new Tesla Model S, its midnight blue exterior accentuated by a grand bow adorning its hood. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, a visceral reaction to an object of considerable value, priced at approximately $90,000, a response laced with both admiration and a hint of covetousness. Grant, standing at an imposing 6 feet 2 inches, clad in his Harvard blazer, possessed a jawline that could grace any magazine cover and an innate confidence, the kind cultivated by a life unburdened by the feeling of inadequacy. He embraced his father, then his mother, and proceeded to engage in handshakes with board members, business associates, and family friends who had witnessed his transformation from a golden child into a golden man. Not a single glance was directed my way. No one turned to the rear of the room to remark, "Silas is present as well." The other son, the elder son, the firstborn, who was seated there in a suit he had purchased himself, observing his family bestow their entire inheritance upon the brother born 3 years subsequent to him, a brother who, in some unfathomable way, had always seemingly reached every significant life milestone before him, remained unmentioned. I offered no outward reaction. I did not rise from my seat. I did not depart. I remained seated, a silent observer, a role I have cultivated throughout my life, always positioned at the periphery of every gathering my family has ever convened. And then, Riley entered the scene. However, before I recount Riley's arrival, her words, and the ensuing revelation that sent seismic tremors through the assembly, it is imperative to discuss the term that shaped my formative years. My father, you see, referred to me as the anchor. And to truly comprehend the impact of that word on a child, one must first understand how that child subsequently wielded it. My name is Silas Marsh. I entered this world in the year 1991 in Scarsdale, New York, the firstborn son of Wesley and Vivian Marsh. For the initial 3 years of my existence, I was the sole male heir, which by default designated me as the successor, the future custodian of the Marsh legacy, destined to lead the company, reside in the ancestral home, and perpetuate the family name with an appropriate degree of distinction. Then came Grant in 1994, and shortly thereafter, when I was 9 years old, a diagnosis arrived: dyslexia, a term explained by a specialist, indicating a difference in my brain's processing of written language, not a deficiency, but a distinct divergence. The letters on the page would shift, reverse, rearrange themselves into a chaotic jumble as my mind struggled to decipher them, akin to attempting to read a newspaper reflected in a mirror. My educators flagged the issue. The specialist provided a detailed explanation. My mother, with a nod, assured me, "We will ensure he receives the necessary support." My father, upon hearing the diagnosis, pronounced with a definitive tone, "So, he's slow." This was not a question, but a pronouncement. "He is not slow, Wesley. He has a processing difference that affects his reading and writing capabilities. It has no bearing on his intelligence. If he cannot read at his grade level, what would you term that? Dyslexia. I call it a problem." Support was indeed provided: tutors, reading specialists, and accommodations at school. Yet, the judgment had already been rendered. In Wesley Marsh's estimation, his eldest son was inherently deficient, and Grant, who exhibited early proficiency in reading, speech, and academic achievement, served as the stark contrast that solidified this judgment into an unshakable family doctrine. Grant was admitted to Exeter. I was held back in the 8th grade. Grant consistently earned straight A's. My GPA hovered around a 2.1. Grant's image graced the front page of the annual holiday newsletter. I was fortunate to warn a mention, if any, in the concluding paragraph. Silas is progressing well. Silas is managing. These were the familial euphemisms for a condescending pity. By the time I reached high school, the chasm between us had become structural. Grant represented the investment. I was the expenditure. Grant embodied the future. I was the impediment. My father, Wesley Marsh, the CEO, the patriarch, the man whose approval dictated the very orbit of our entire family, summarized his assessment of his two sons with a metaphor that I carry with me to this day, not as a source of pain, but as a potent catalyst. "Grant is the sail," he remarked during a dinner party when I was 16. I happened to be in the kitchen, retrieving a glass of water, unaware of his proximity or my eavesdropping. Silas is the anchor. Every family has one. The anchor is what prevents you from moving forward. The anchor, not uttered with malice, but with a profound sense of resignation. It was the casual, almost indifferent dismissal of a father who had weighed his son, found him lacking, and had already shifted his focus to the son who met his exacting standards. I overheard his words through the kitchen door. I gently set down a glass of water. I ascended the stairs. I lay on my bed, and something within me fundamentally transformed. Not to break, but to change. Similar to how metal reshapes under intense heat, it does not fracture or shatter. It becomes something distinct, something more robust. I did not weep. I did not confront him. I made a resolute decision. That decision was this: I would never solicit anything from my father, not his approval, not his financial assistance, not his endorsement on a check, a letter of recommendation, or an entryway into the world he so meticulously controlled. I would forge my own path, construct my own world, and build it so far beyond his scope of vision that he would never anticipate its emergence. I barely managed to graduate from high school in 2010. Grant, at 16, was already receiving recruitment offers from prestigious Ivy League institutions. My mother was absent from my graduation ceremony, attending Grant's award recognition at Exeter. My father was present, however, seated in the back. He offered no applause when my name was called. Later, in the parking lot, he inquired, "So, what is your plan?" "I intend to work." "Work where?" "I will ascertain that. You should determine that with haste, Silas. The world does not pause for those who cannot keep pace." I departed from my childhood home that summer at the age of 19. I relocated to Newark, New Jersey, due to a distant acquaintance of a high school friend who had an available room in an apartment near Penn Station, costing $500 per month. My total savings at the time amounted to $1,200, accumulated from a part-time position at a hardware establishment. I did not disclose my destination to my parents. They, in turn, did not inquire. For the initial 2 years, I undertook any work I could find: manual labor in construction, washing dishes in restaurants, and a brief period working at a car wash. Then, in 2012, when I was 21, I applied for a position loading trucks at a shipping warehouse in Elizabeth, New Jersey. The warehouse was managed by a regional freight enterprise. The work was physically demanding, involving the lifting of packages, loading trailers, and sorting cargo based on its destination. The remuneration was $13 per hour, commencing at 4 in the morning. It was precisely the kind of occupation that Wesley Marsh would have cited as irrefutable evidence of his son's status as the proverbial anchor. However, something remarkable occurred on that loading dock. Something that had never transpired for me within the confines of a classroom, at a dinner table, or in any setting my family had ever placed me. I understood it. Not reading, not writing. Not the enigmatic symbols on a page that my mind habitually rendered into chaos. The logistics of the freight system, the seamless flow of goods, the logical placement of items, their intended destinations, and the most efficient means of transit. It was a spatial, tangible, and three-dimensional problem-solving endeavor that did not necessitate the decoding of letters. It demanded an understanding of movement, capacity, timing, and optimal routes. Dyslexia had rendered me exceptionally challenged at reading, but in its place, it had bestowed upon me a unique aptitude, a mind that conceived in systems, in patterns, and in spatial relationships. A mind capable of surveying a loading dock teeming with 40 trailers and discerning the most efficient sequence for their loading, much like a chess grandmaster perceives moves on a board, not letter by letter, but move by move. Within a mere 6 months, I ascended to the position of the fastest loader on the dock. Within a year, The supervisor entrusted me with route optimization, a role focused on devising the most efficient pathways for the delivery trucks between pickup and drop-off points. 3 years later, I was overseeing routes for the entire Northeastern Division. In 2014, I encountered a gentleman named Walter Kane. He was 57 years old at the time, a retired owner of a trucking company who had divested his fleet and was providing consultative services to the warehouse as a favor to the general manager. Walter embodied the spirit of self-made success, having commenced his journey with a single truck purchased in 1976 and meticulously building a regional freight operation over the course of 40 years. He perceived in me a quality that had eluded the recognition of everyone in my family. "You think in terms of trucks," he observed one afternoon, watching me meticulously redraw a route map spread across the break room table. "Most individuals think in terms of paper. You visualize trucks. I struggle with reading paper. I'm aware of that. I have noticed. And I assure you, it holds no consequence. The world operates on trucks, not on paper. Your ability to comprehend movement is more valuable than 100 Harvard degrees." Walter became my mentor, though the term was never explicitly used by either of us. He simply began to frequent the warehouse, posing inquiries, attentively listening to my responses, and imparting his profound knowledge of the freight industry, pricing strategies, contractual agreements, insurance protocols, and regulatory compliance. These were the essential elements I would require should I aspire to own trucks rather than simply load them. In 2017, at the age of 26, I informed Walter of my intention to acquire my own truck. He regarded me for an extended period before producing a check for $40,000. "Repay me when you are able. No interest, no formal contract. Simply a handshake and a promise that you will not name the truck in my honor." I procured a pre-owned Freightliner Cascadia, established my enterprise as Sentinel Freight Systems, and completed the LLC registration in New Jersey. On a Monday morning in March of 2017, I embarked on my inaugural delivery, transporting 16 pallets of industrial cleaning product from Elizabeth to Baltimore, earning a remarkable $2,200 for a single trip. $2,200. That was more than an entire week's wages at the warehouse for one trip that I had personally planned, executed, and delivered. That marked the genesis. By 2018, my fleet had expanded to 3 trucks. I enlisted Riley Cross, a former dispatcher from UPS who possessed an intellect that far surpassed her superiors and a justifiable indignation regarding their shortcomings, rendering her the perfect complement to my own strengths. She expertly managed operations, while I focused on strategic expansion. Our interactions were often characterized by spirited debate, yet we were in complete accord on the singular, paramount objective: to construct an entity that would be impervious to external forces. By 2020, our fleet had grown to 22 trucks. By 2022, we operated 60. And by 2024, we commanded a fleet of 140 trucks, operated 3 warehouses located in Elizabeth, Trenton, and Allentown, and served over 200 commercial clients spanning 14 states. Our annual revenue reached $38 million, with an estimated company valuation of approximately $62 million. I was 33 years old, at the helm of a company whose worth far exceeded the wildest dreams of most individuals. Yet my father remained convinced I was still engaged in loading trucks at some warehouse. In 2021, Sentinel's sales division secured a new client, Marsh Industrial Coatings, my family's enterprise. With an annual revenue of $75 million, they required dependable freight services for their specialized coatings, necessitating the transportation of hazardous materials under temperature control conditions with stringent delivery timelines. These were precisely the logistical challenges that most freight companies actively avoided. Yet Sentinel excelled at. The account was managed by my sales director, a gentleman named Noah Pierce, who was entirely unaware that the chief executive officer of the client company was, in fact, my father. Wesley engaged directly with Ace's team, approved the contract, and commenced remitting approximately $2.1 million annually to Sentinel for shipping fees. I became aware of this account 3 weeks after its official inception. While reviewing new contracts, I noticed the name Marsh Industrial Coatings, Westchester County, New York. I stared at the document for a considerable duration. Then, I closed the file without uttering a word. I did not terminate the account. I did not reveal my connection. I did not contact my father to announce, "Dad, the company transporting your products is the one your so-called incapable son established." I simply allowed the arrangement to proceed, because the inherent irony was not a weapon to be deployed, but a stark reality. And I had long ago learned that the most potent action one can take with a fact is to permit it to exist without the expectation of external validation. However, Riley perceived it. Naturally, she saw everything. Your family's company is compensating us $2 million annually for the shipment of their products. Indeed, and they are unaware that you are the proprietor of Sentinel? No. And your father lauded our efficiency during his board meeting last quarter? Apparently. Silas, this is preposterous. You must inform them. On what grounds? Because your father believes you are a failure, and you are, in reality, the linchpin of his entire supply chain. I have no need for him to be aware of that. Perhaps you do not, but he does. I remained unconvinced. For 4 years, I held to my conviction, because acknowledging my father would necessitate acknowledging his opinion, and I had dedicated 13 years to constructing a life predicated on the principle that his judgment was utterly inconsequential. Until the 17th of May, 2025, Grant's graduation celebration, the Tesla, the grand announcement, and the anchor, seated in the rear row, meticulously counting the instances his brother's name was spoken while his own remained conspicuously absent. 43-0. Riley arrived precisely at 7:15 in the evening. I had informed her about the festivities, but had not extended an invitation. She arrived nonetheless, as Riley Cross operates independently of directives, even from the individual who signs her paychecks. Furthermore, she had borne witness for 7 years to my quiet endurance of my family's disdain, and had unilaterally determined that this prolonged period of passive acceptance was definitively concluded. She was attired in a blazer and heels, an unusual choice for her. Riley's customary ensemble consisted of sturdy boots and a jacket emblazoned with the Sentinel logo across the chest. She entered the Scarsdale mansion, navigating past the catering staff, the clinking champagne glasses, and the 80 guests who held no acquaintance with her. She found me situated in the back row. Leaning in, she whispered, "It is time to tell them. Riley, please do not. You have occupied the rear section of your own family's living room for 2 hours while your father bestows his entire fortune upon your brother, and has not uttered your name once. Not a single time, Silas. I am aware. And you are content with this? I am not present for their benefit. I am here because Grant extended an invitation. Grant does not even comprehend the nature of your professional endeavors. Grant has never inquired." Precisely. None of them have ever inquired, and therein lies the fundamental issue. Not that they are uninformed, but that they have never demonstrated sufficient interest to ascertain the truth. Riley, I am not soliciting your permission. She turned and proceeded towards the front of the room, and I experienced a sensation I had not encountered in years. Not fear, not exhilaration, but a peculiar sense of vertigo the sensation of a man on the precipice of relinquishing control over a narrative he had meticulously constructed over 13 years. The room still buzzed with residual excitement from the Tesla revelation. Wesley held court near the fireplace, a drink in hand, graciously accepting congratulations as if presiding over his own coronation. Grant stood beside him, engaging in handshakes. Vivian circulated, ensuring each guest had received personalized attention, performing the role of family hostess with the practiced precision of a woman who had fulfilled this duty for 3 decades. Riley approached my father. She extended her hand. "Mr. Marsh, I apologize for the interruption. My name is Riley Cross. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Sentinel Freight Systems." Wesley accepted her handshake, his expression registering a flicker of recognition, not of Riley herself, but of the company name. "Sentinel? Yes, I am familiar with the name. You are our freight carrier, have been for the past 4 years. We manage all of your specialized coatings distribution across the entire eastern seaboard. An excellent company. Quite possibly the most efficient logistics operation we have ever partnered with. Are you representing the firm today?" In a manner of speaking, I felt it was important that you be informed of its ownership. She turned, her gaze sweeping across the room, and pointed directly at me. At the rear row, at the elder son clad in his self-purchased suit at the anchor. Sentinel Freight Systems was founded and is exclusively owned by your son, Silas Marsh. Behold the profound silence that descends upon a room populated by 80 individuals. It is the sound of the very air being siphoned out through every aperture simultaneously. It is the taste of champagne losing its effervescence in a glass. It is the cacophonous grinding to a halt of an entire family's carefully constructed narrative. Every gear jamming, every assumption fracturing, every meticulously maintained belief about who is the celebrated success and who is the burdensome anchor, crumbling under the immense weight of a single, unfathomable truth. Wesley Marsh's gaze shifted from Riley to me, then back to Riley. "That is not possible. It is not only possible, Mr. Marsh, it has been an established reality for 8 years. Sentinel commenced operations in 2017 with a single truck. It now operates 140 trucks, 3 warehouses, and serves over 200 commercial clients. Our annual revenue stands at $38 million. The company's valuation is estimated at approximately $62 million. And the individual who built this enterprise from its very foundations is currently seated in the back row of this room because no one deemed it appropriate to place him anywhere else." The collective gaze of the 80 attendees now fixed upon me. My mother's eyes widened in disbelief, her hand instinctively flying to her mouth. Grant's expression was one of bewilderment, struggling to process information that defied any logical framework he possessed. Wesley's eyes narrowed, the piercing gaze of a man confronted with a truth he cannot readily accept, for to embrace it would necessitate dismantling the very edifice of his beliefs, painstakingly constructed over 34 years. "Silas," my father's voice, devoid of its usual booming authority, was subdued. The quiet tone of a man whose absolute certainty had just been irrevocably breached. "Is this assertion accurate?" I rose slowly to my feet, buttoned my jacket, and proceeded from the rear of the room towards the front, traversing the throng of guests who had spent the preceding 2 hours celebrating my brother, while I remained an unseen presence in the back row. I halted directly before my father, a mere 3 feet separating us, a distance that had spanned 34 years. "Yes," I affirmed. "It is true. You are the owner of Sentinel Logistics? I founded it, I built it, and I own it. We have been remitting payments to you. $2.1 million annually for the past 4 years. Your board has commended our operational efficiency. You personally authorized the contract renewal last September. May I inquire why you chose not to inform me? The question, the very question that Riley, Clara, Walter, and virtually everyone else who knew the truth had posed, unable to comprehend my silence toward the one individual whose revelation would have most profoundly impacted. Because you never inquired, I stated. In my entire 34 years, you never once asked me about the trajectory of my life. At the age of 9, you determined me to be unintelligent. At 14, you designated me as the anchor. When Grant secured his admission to Exeter, you concluded that you possessed one son worthy of investment and another destined for oblivion. And you forgot me, Father, systematically and completely. You eradicated my existence so thoroughly that you've been transferring $2 million annually for 4 years without realizing it was me. The room was plunged into an absolute, profound silence. 80 witnesses bearing testament to a familial reckoning that should have remained a private affair. It was unfolding publicly due to 34 years of unspoken personal anguish that had never been addressed. The enterprise that transports every shipment of your specialized coatings, the operation that ensures your logistical network remains functional, the very entity your own board identified as the bedrock of our distribution infrastructure. That enterprise was established by the son you referred to as the cornerstone. It was forged without a cent of your capital, without leveraging your influence, without trading on your esteemed name, and without a single word of affirmation from the man who was expected to offer it. Wesley's expression contorted in a manner I had never witnessed. His composure was faltering. The veneer of the chief executive, the stoic demeanor of the boardroom, the authoritative stance of the patriarch, it was all crumbling. Beneath the surface lay something raw and undeveloped. Something that, if I'm being entirely candid, resembled remorse. Silas, I haven't concluded. I turned toward my mother. Vivian, standing near the window, her eyes welling with tears, her hands still pressed to her mouth. Mother, at Aunt Claire's birthday celebration last year, you introduced me as our other son. Not Silas, not your eldest. Our other son, as if I were the spare key on a ring. The one kept but rarely utilized. She closed her eyes. Silence followed. There was nothing left to articulate, for my words held an undeniable truth. And truth, when delivered without animosity, possesses a far greater resilience against refutation than any accusation. I shifted my gaze to Grant, my younger brother, the favored child, the fair-weather companion. He stood beside our father, and his visage was not as I had anticipated. I had braced myself for defensiveness. I had expected the automatic shield of a man whose elevated status had just been unexpectedly shaken. Instead, I observed something far simpler and more profoundly disheartening. Bewilderment. The genuine confusion of an individual so deeply embedded within the family's established narrative that the prospect of its alternate interpretation had never once occurred to him. Grant, Silas, I had absolutely no awareness. You were provided with opportunities one was not, and you embraced them, as is natural when things are freely given. Yet, you never once sought anything either. In 31 years, you have never inquired about my profession, not once. He opened his mouth, then closed it, as he sifted through his memories, searching for an exception, and found none. You were unaware I possessed a company, because you were never privy to anything about me. None of you were. You knew my academic standing. You were aware of my diagnosis. You were familiar with the narrative that painted me as the slow one, the problematic child, the anchor, but you never truly knew me. To know me would have necessitated looking at me, and no one in this family has truly looked at me since Grant's arrival. The room fell into an absolute hush. The distant sounds of caterers in the kitchen, the gentle clinking of dishes being stacked, the ordinary hum of a celebration continuing in the periphery while a family's foundation was fracturing at its core. This entire discourse was unplanned. Marin had compelled the revelation upon me, and my intention had been merely to confirm it and depart. However, standing before my father in the opulent living room of a mansion valued at $13 million, a property I had never been offered a share of, something shifted within me. Not anger, something far older than anger. The cumulative burden of 34 years of deliberate oversight. Every parent-teacher conference my father had missed. Every seasonal newsletter that relegated me to a mere footnote. Every dinner table conversation that revolved around Grant's accomplishments, while mine remained unacknowledged, non-existent within the family's perceived reality. I want you to grasp something, Father. I did not establish Sentinel to disprove you. I founded it because, after you designated me the anchor, I resolved that I would never again require your assistance. Not your financial resources, not your enterprise, not your validation. I would construct my own entity through my own efforts on my own terms. And I succeeded. You could have informed me and conveyed what precisely. Hello, Father. The son you dismissed manages a logistics operation exceeding the scale of most established corporations. You would have claimed credit for it. You would have artfully woven it into a narrative about yourself, about the resilience of the Marsh lineage, about the inherent strength of Marsh blood, about how even the anchor ultimately prevails. But it is not about you. It never was. It is about the boy who struggled to read until he was 14, who recognized that the world operates on the movement of vehicles, not on paper, and consequently assembled a fleet of 140 such vehicles while you were occupied in venerating your golden child. Wesley's gaze met mine with an intensity one had never before witnessed. Not with pride, for that might or might not materialize, and I was uncertain if I even desired it. Not with anger, for that too would likely surface later, once the embarrassment of his public exposure transmuted into a defensive posture. In that precise moment, his eyes reflected the distinct expression of a man who had just realized that the very item he had dismissed was, in fact, his most precious possession. $62 million? He inquired softly. Give or take. Exceeding Marsh Industrial's valuation. Marsh Industrial boasts $75 million in revenue. However, revenue does not equate to value. Father, you imparted that very lesson yourself during one of those dinners I was not meant to overhear. Sentinel's enterprise valuation, encompassing its assets, contracts, and growth trajectory, approximates $62 million. Your enterprise, by the same metric, is valued at approximately $50 million. You assert that your company holds a greater worth than mine. I am stating that your company subsidizes mine to ensure its continued operation. Draw your own conclusions. I turned away, not with theatrical flourish, no dramatic exit or slamming door. I turned as one turns when they have articulated their purpose, and the confines of the room suddenly feel too constricting for the magnitude of the unfolding emotions. I moved toward the exit. Grant intercepted me in the corridor. Silas, hold on. I halted. My brother, 3 years my junior, 6 inches taller, a graduate of Harvard, owner of a Tesla, heir to the Marsh legacy, Grant Marsh, standing in the hallway of our parents' estate, regarding me as if he were seeing me for the very first time. I was unaware, he confessed, of any of it. Why did you not apprise me? Would you have listened? Had I contacted you at Harvard and declared, Grant, I've acquired a truck and launched a logistics enterprise, would you have treated that communication with seriousness? Or would you have responded with, that's wonderful, Silas, delivered in the same tone my mother uses when she deems my progress satisfactory. He winced, acknowledging the unspoken truth. We both did. I would have said, "That's wonderful," he conceded. I would not have grasped its significance, because to understand its significance would have required you to question the prevailing narrative. The narrative positing you as the gifted one and me as the flawed one. And that narrative has proven convenient for everyone in this family, except for me. It wasn't convenient, he countered. It simply existed. I gave it no thought. That is precisely the issue, Grant. You were never compelled to consider it. The narrative served your purposes. It did not serve mine. Therefore, I crafted an alternative one. He remained silent for a moment, then uttered something entirely unexpected. May I see it? The company, the trucks, the warehouses. May I witness what you have constructed? I regarded my brother, 31 years of age, holding an MBA, the newly appointed vice president of operations at Marsh Industrial Coatings, a man who had been granted every advantage, now seeking to glimpse what his sibling had achieved from nothing. Yes, I replied. Venture to Newark next week. I will provide you with a comprehensive tour. I would appreciate that. Bring sturdy footwear. The loading bay can be quite dusty. A faint smile touched his lips. I shall procure a pair. Your first pair? Indeed, my first. 2 months have elapsed. It is now July of the year 2025. The summer heat is intense. Our fleet is operating at full capacity, and Sentinel has just secured a significant contract with a national food distribution firm, projecting an additional $6 million in annual revenue and necessitating the acquisition of 12 new vehicles and the hiring of 20 new drivers. I reprimanded Marin for her impulsive decision to confront me at the gathering. Her response was, "I am aware, and I would do it again." I subsequently awarded her a raise. She had undeniably earned it, not for the staged revelation, but for 7 years of dedicated service in ensuring Sentinel's operational success during its formative stages. Grant arrived in Newark. I guided him through the facilities. He traversed the Elizabeth warehouse, clad in borrowed work boots that remained impeccably clean, observing the intricacies of the loading procedures, the efficiency of the dispatch system, the sophistication of the fleet management software, the controlled disarray of 140 vehicles transporting freight across 14 states. He observed with the keen, analytical eye of a seasoned business professional, the discerning gaze of an MBA holder, and I observed him observing. I witnessed the precise moment the sheer magnitude of my accomplishment registered. This is truly extraordinary, Silas. It is fundamentally a trucking company. It is a $62 million trucking company established by an individual who began his career on a loading dock. That transcends the definition of a mere trucking company. It constitutes a compelling case study. I shall delegate the creation of case studies to you. My sole function is to facilitate the movement of freight. A genuine laugh escaped him, the first unreserved one share between us in years, perhaps ever. May I pose a question? Certainly. Regarding the dyslexia, how was I able to build a company if I do not possess proficient reading skills? I retrieved my mobile device, displaying the array of speech-to-text applications, the audio-based contract reviews, the voice memo system I employ in lieu of written correspondence, and the dedicated team, commencing with Marin, who managed the text-intensive tasks while I focused on operational oversight. I did not conquer dyslexia, Grant. I architected my operations around it, much like one navigates a truck around a road obstruction. You do not repair the road. You discover an alternative route to your destination. He looked at the phone, then at the applications, and finally at the meticulously constructed system I had devised to navigate a world designed for individuals whose cognitive processes differ from my own. Father remains unaware of all this. Father never inquired. He ought to have. Yes, he absolutely should have. My mother contacted me the week following the event. I initially disregarded the first two calls. On the third attempt, I answered, Silas, Mother, I need to convey something to you, and I implore you to allow me to express it. Very well. I failed you. Not merely your father, but myself as well. I witnessed him dismiss you for 3 decades, and I remained silent. I permitted him to refer to you as the anchor without correction. I introduced you as our other son because it was less arduous than explaining your divergence from Grant's trajectory. And the reason you were not on Grant's path was because we never afforded you the opportunity to be. We lavished everything upon Grant and nothing upon you, and I rationalized it by convincing myself that Grant required it more. But the unvarnished truth is that Grant was the simpler choice. He conformed to the idealized image we desired. You did not, and rather than adapt the image, we attempted to exclude you from it. I listened, standing within the confines of my office at the Sentinel warehouse. My gaze fixed on my fleet through the window, I absorbed my mother's words, the very words I had spent 34 years not needing, not soliciting, and yet, evidently, still requiring. My eyes welled, my chest tightened, and the voice on the other end belonged to the woman who had borne me for 9 months and subsequently spent the subsequent 34 years averting her gaze. I hear you, Mother. Do you forgive me? I am in the process of working towards that. That is a reasonable expectation. It will necessitate time. I have time. My father has not initiated contact. I am not anticipating that he will. Wesley Marsh is a man who has devoted 62 years to being unequivocally correct. Admitting his 34-year-long misjudgment of his own son represents a foundational collapse that an individual of his nature is unlikely to surmount swiftly. He may eventually acknowledge it, or he may not. Regardless, I have a company to manage. Walter Kane journeyed from Tom's River the previous month. He is 78 years of age, retired, with a suntan complexion, still sporting the very same boots he wore on the loading docks in 1976. Upon arriving at my warehouse, he surveyed the 140 vehicles, the 3 structures, and the entire operation that his $40,000 investment had enabled. You repaid me in 2019, he stated. Every last cent. I recall. I should have levied interest. You most certainly should have. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Your father is mistaken about you, Silas. He has consistently been mistaken about you, but you have always been aware of this. You have known it since your youth, when you were loading trucks and perceiving nuances that the rest of us overlooked. I am aware of your perception. Therefore, cease carrying his opinion as if it holds any significance. It does not. It never has. I'm aware of that as well. Then act accordingly. Occupy the front row, young man. You have rightfully earned it. Clara conveyed a similar sentiment to me last night. We were relaxing on the sofa in our apartment in Newark, an apartment I chose over a penthouse because penthouses are designed for those who prioritize the vista, whereas my priority is proximity to the warehouse, which represents the only view I have ever valued. How are you processing the familial dynamics? She inquired. Complicated. Is it a favorable complication or an unfavorable one? Both. Grant desires to forge a connection. My mother wishes to offer an apology. My father seeks to act as though nothing transpired. And I wish to report to work in the morning and move freight. Then go to work in the morning and move freight. And allow the intricate matters to resolve themselves at their own pace. You sound like a logistics consultant. I sound like a woman who cherishes a man who erected an empire from a loading dock and still rises at 4 in the morning because the trucks do not operate themselves. They will someday. Autonomos vehículos. And when that day arrives, you will discover something else to construct. That is your innate capability, Silas. You build things. She is correct. That is precisely what I do. It is 5 o'clock in the morning. I am standing on the loading dock at the Elizabeth warehouse. The identical type of dock where I commenced my journey at the age of 21, handling boxes for $13 per hour, attempting to decipher the mechanisms by which goods transition from their origin to their intended destination. The sun has yet to ascend, but the illumination is present, and the initial transport vehicles are maneuvering into their designated bays. Inside, the dispatch board is alight with routes, shipments, and delivery deadlines, illuminating the elegant and intricate logic of ensuring the world's freight arrives punctually. 140 trucks, 3 warehouses, 200 clients, $38 million in revenue. Established by an individual who was unable to read until he reached the age of 14, built without a Harvard degree, built without a Tesla, built without a father who believed in him. My father labeled me the anchor, the element that impedes progress, the deadweight that prevents the family from advancing. However, there is a fundamental characteristic of anchors that my father, a man who has consistently favored sales, has never comprehended. An anchor does not drag you down. An anchor serves to stabilize your position. An anchor is the critical component that prevents you from drifting when the currents are fierce, the winds are contrary, and the waters are profound. An anchor represents the most substantial, most robust, and most indispensable piece of equipment aboard a vessel. And without it, the ship is subject to the ocean's whims, not the captain's direction, but rather the ocean's discretion. I am the anchor. I have perpetually been the anchor. And the enterprise my father constructed, the $75 million operation he is now relinquishing to his sales division, relies upon the anchor to maintain its freight movement, its supply chain functionality, and the timely arrival of its products at their destinations. The sales division garners the accolades. The anchor performs the essential labor, and the anchor requires no Tesla to comprehend its inherent worth. Was Wesley wrong to call his own son the anchor for 34 years? Or was Silas right to build something so strong that the family finally had a look at him? Tell me what you think in the comments below. If this story made you think, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We post new family dramas every week, and you won't want to miss what happens next.